Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how Nintendo Switch 2 in 2026 is already starting to look insane. And so just hear me out here. I want to have this discussion. Right now everyone's playing Donkey Kong Bonanza. I have some theory videos and tech analysis videos I'm working on, but they're going to need a little bit more time. Gotta get through the game and all. In the meanwhile, I want to talk about how things are starting to look pretty exciting here. We have yet to get a summer Nintendo Direct, and I know some people want to believe it's never going to happen. I believe it's going to happen. Regardless, announcements need to come, and there's likely going to be another later year Direct presentation, as there typically is almost every year. And so the point I'm making here is that Nintendo's yet to start really making announcements for next year, and yet when you consider what we already know about for next year, and what makes sense to happen next year, the exclusives lineup on Nintendo Switch 2 is starting to look overwhelming. And so that's what I really want to dive into today. But before going forward, let me point out I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. Okay, so let's talk about what we know is happening already. Nintendo's already announced that a new Rhythm Heaven and a new Tomodachi Life are coming out next year. Now these are coming out for Nintendo Switch 1, but the Switch 2 is backwards compatible with Switch 1, so these games will be playable on Switch 2. And then you take a look at the variety of Switch 2 editions we've been getting, and there have been rumors that more would be on the way. That seems to make sense. But even if they're not going to be Switch 2 editions, a variety of Switch 1 games are also getting free enhancements. I think there's plenty of reason to suspect that Rhythm Heaven and Tomodachi Life will have some sort of enhanced version on Switch 2, be it for free or an expanded Switch 2 edition. And this just might be the standard moving forward for any sort of Switch 1 title. But then we also know about the exclusive coming from Software, one of the best developers in the industry, Duskbloods. That's an exclusive coming out next year. So there are 3 games we already know about that are pretty big deal exclusives coming to Switch 2 in 2026. But there's another title that's essentially guaranteed to be coming out next year as well. And that's Generation 10 of Pokémon. We are getting Pokémon Legends ZA this year, and it's essentially been confirmed by this point that it will be the only major mainline title. Maybe we'll also see Pokemon Champions come out this year. That remains to be seen. We'll probably be finding out in a few short days in the upcoming Pokemon Presents. But point is, Game Freak finally, after so many years, took a break year, is only putting out Legends ZA this year, and finally, the generations are going beyond just 3 years. So they've been cooking. They've been taking their time with this next big mainline Pokemon game, Generation 10, which is almost certainly coming out next year. Anytime there's a new generation Pokemon game, it's an absolutely huge deal, 20+ million seller guaranteed. But Generation 10, the 10th generation, hitting the double digits in terms of generations here, and oh, also conveniently, this is happening in 2026, which is the 30th anniversary of Pokemon, and Pokemon loves to celebrate their anniversaries. They do it every year, but when it comes to something as big as a 30th anniversary, it seems like they're going to go even bigger here. So with more time spent on Generation 10, likely being developed with Switch 2 in mind very early on, and it being the 30th anniversary, we should have high expectations of Game Freak this time around, higher than usual at least. I know a lot of people are pretty down on Game Freak as of late, but the point is, everything that's been happening leading up to this moment suggests very big things. So with those 4 titles, 2026 already has a pretty strong advantage. And we should also consider the possibility that Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, Splatoon Raiders, and Pokemon Champions don't have release dates yet. Some of them may come out in this year of 2025, some of them might come out sometime in 2026. But when we consider the history of things, there's another title that seems very likely to be coming out next year as well. And what is that title? The next brand new 3D Mario. Now some people might say, well hold up, we just got Donkey Kong Bonanza, we're only getting started on this game, there's no way the 3D Mario team who just put out Donkey Kong Bonanza is ready to put out a new 3D Mario game next year. We are years away. Some people might be thinking that. But here's the thing. 1, never in the entire history of Nintendo putting out consoles had they waited beyond the second holiday for any of their consoles to put out the next mainline Mario title. I don't think that's going to change now. We are seeing one of the longest gaps since the last totally brand new mainline Mario game, Mario Odyssey in 2017. There's no way in the last 8+ years that they haven't been figuring they should get a 3D Mario ready for early on Switch 2, because that would be a key piece to having a successful generation. From a business perspective, it would absolutely make no sense to think that Nintendo hasn't been preparing a 3D Mario to be ready early on. But then secondly, we have an even better understanding of who has been working on Donkey Kong Bonanza. Yes, it's being made by EPD Group number 8, the same EPD group that's responsible for 3D Mario. But we've also seen the devs involved with Donkey Kong Bonanza, and there are some names that are missing there, such as Koizumi. Koizumi does not appear to be as involved as he was for Mario Odyssey, so what has he been working on, focusing on as of late? Perhaps 3D Mario, as what would make a lot of sense. So, point is, 3D Mario seems very likely to come out next year, not to mention, with Mario's 40th anniversary this year, the Mario movie coming out early next year, they're probably going to want to have a very big game to follow it up, similar to how they had Mario Wonder, a big brand new 2D Mario, to follow up the Mario movie back in 2023. So it makes sense to expect 3D Mario by the end of 2026, I would say. But on the note of big anniversaries, next year is Zelda's 40th anniversary. Now, unlike Mario, Nintendo doesn't go very hard on these massive anniversary celebrations for Zelda as consistently as they do for Mario every 5 years. And so yes, admittedly, the odds of Nintendo having a massive anniversary event to celebrate Zelda for its 40th anniversary are less likely than Mario. But that doesn't mean they won't do it, and that doesn't mean there isn't a history of Nintendo still celebrating those anniversaries. They do, it's just not always a massive anniversary direct with several games coming out. It might just be something smaller, like a special Game & Watch edition like they did for the 35th anniversary. But from what we have seen of the year 2025, there is no sort of major new Zelda release this year, unless you count Hyrule's Age of Imprisonment, but that is just a spin-off, and the Zelda movie is coming out in early 2027. When you also consider the history of console launches, typically we have some sort of major Zelda effort to come out in those first couple years, if not a brand new title, some sort of big remaster or remake. And so that has us circling back to this idea of the long theorized Ocarina of Time remake, which is also rumored. Could they be saving that for the 40th anniversary? That is a possibility. I wouldn't say it's nearly even close to as guaranteed as something like Pokémon or even 3D Mario next year, but it's definitely something else to consider as a major potential release for 2026. On the note of rumors though, there's another rumor that in the July Nintendo Direct that is supposedly happening that a variety of different sources have corroborated on. We'll see if it actually happens, but if this does happen, according to Beat-em-Ups, there is going to be a teaser for Animal Crossing in 2026. And this actually makes a lot of sense considering what's going on right now. So EPD Group number 5 is responsible for Splatoon and Animal Crossing. And what we have seen from Splatoon this year, I do believe is suggestive that they are prioritizing getting out a new Animal Crossing first before a new Splatoon. They gave us this massive update to Splatoon 3 for Switch 2, and they announced a spin-off, Splatoon Raiders, which looks to be largely based off the engine they used for Splatoon 3. So that's likely not taking away too much developmental resources to get that together, and suggests that they are focusing most of their efforts on bringing out the next mainline Animal Crossing, which would then mean it's coming out sooner than later into the Switch 2 generation, possibly in that second year. I do not think that's totally out of the question, and when we factor in this rumor from Beat-em-Ups, and also this has been rumored by Nashweedle as well since last year, that Animal Crossing has been projected for a 2026 release, that's another huge game that could come out in 2026. Animal Crossing New Horizons is the second best-selling Switch title. So when you think about it from a business perspective, perhaps Nintendo would want to get out Animal Crossing sooner than later after the incredible success of New Horizons on Switch 1. And yet there's even more to consider here. So there's been a lot of conversation about what's going on with the Metroid series. We are still waiting for that specific release date in 2025 for Metroid Prime 4. Presumably we'll get that announcement in a Nintendo Direct hopefully by the end of July. So Metroid Prime 4 is obviously the big Metroid game for 2025. But there's also been a lot of conversation on why Metroid isn't as successful as maybe it should be. And some things that have come up from rumors and just overall logic is that part of this may have to do with the fact that Metroid hasn't been as consistent as other series. You look at other series that Nintendo's been putting out over the last couple generations, the consistency does seem to have helped build up a larger audience. And so it might not be that much of a stretch to think that Nintendo has a plan for Metroid to make it more of a consistent series. We got Metroid Dread in 2021, we got Prime Remastered in 2023, and we're getting Prime 4 in 2025. But there have been rumors that Retro Studios is already preparing to make Metroid Prime 5 immediately after Metroid Prime 4. Considering the investment they put into Metroid Prime 4, it would make sense to take advantage of this amazing engine that they've modernized for Prime 4 and make an even better version of Metroid with Switch 2 in mind from the beginning. But there is absolutely no way that Metroid Prime 5 is going to be ready for 2026. That's not what I'm getting at here. What I am getting at here, though, is that perhaps Nintendo is setting things up to have consistent Metroid releases. Perhaps not every year, but with a lot more regularity. And there's also been a lot of talk that maybe the next 2D Metroid might not be that far off. Sakamoto, the creator of Metroid, has talked about plans to go beyond the story of Metroid Dread. 2D Metroid, that's Metroid 5, so Metroid 6 may already be in the works. And Mercury Steam, the developers of Metroid Dread, that was one of the most successful games to ever come out from a development studio in Spain. The best-selling Metroid game to date, 3+ million. It would be shocking to think that they wouldn't be working on the next 2D Metroid, especially considering all the comments we've gotten from Sakamoto on how he wants to continue the series, and also when we consider this idea that Nintendo may want to push Metroid being more of a regular release so the IP can continue to build and become more of a stronger, more consistent seller. And yes, there have also been rumors that Mercury Steam is working on the next Metroid. Big shocker here. But when they put out Metroid Dread, that was back in 2021. And before that, they had worked on Metroid Samus Returns, a remake of Metroid 2, back on the Nintendo 3DS, which came out in 2017. After a 4-year gap, they were able to put out Metroid Dread on Switch 1. So in 2026, it would be an even larger gap, 5 years. The next 2D Metroid could potentially immediately follow Metroid Prime 4 to come out in 2026. And what's interesting about this is that you might think, well, maybe they wouldn't do that because they would want to have DLC come out for Prime 4 first. And maybe that's a possibility. Maybe we get DLC for Prime 4 in 2026, and then Metroid 6 comes out in 2027, or maybe they still both come out in 2026, and then we can start talking about Metroid Prime 5. But if Retro Studios is simply moving on to Metroid Prime 5, then maybe they don't focus on DLC for Prime 4, and they allow something else Metroid to take the spotlight in the next year, that being the next 2D Metroid, while Retro works on Metroid Prime 5 so it can come out sooner than later into the generation of Switch 2. But there's actually something else that I don't think is that far off either. And this is going back to the Midori codename leaks. We've already seen 5 of them already, with Donkey Kong Bonanza, Splatoon Raiders, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 Edition, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Super Mario Party Jamboree. Dragon Drive possibly might be another one. But the last I'm really focusing on here is codename SP Red, which we believe is 3D Mario, which we already talked about earlier in this video. And the other is Project Legacy, said to have been made by Monolith Soft. And all these other codenames have turned out to be true, so it seems like out of any sort of rumor or leak that we talk about, this is one of the more reliable ones. And so what is Monolith Soft working on? Well, they were hiring for a new IP years ago, and they had this post up on their site until recently, last year. And now they're hiring for a new RPG project, which might suggest that they are wrapping things up with this project they've been working on throughout the entire Switch era. Which might seem like a stretch to some people, but now we know, straight from the mouths of Nintendo, the developers of Mario Kart World and Bonanza, they had other huge projects that they were developing since the beginning of the Switch 1 era, like Donkey Kong Bonanza, like Mario Kart World, so perhaps Monolith Soft has also been working on this huge project, Project Legacy, throughout most of the Switch era, and they are getting it ready to come out in the year of 2026. Monolith Soft pretty consistently comes out with games. They just put out Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition earlier this year, and considering how most of these codename leak projects seem to be for games that are coming out early onto the Switch 2 era, I am leaning in the direction of perhaps Project Legacy could come out next year in 2026. I am skeptical it could come out in this year of 2025 because nothing's been announced yet, and many people are skeptical there will even be any more major releases for this year from Nintendo, although I still think there is room for some announcements. When we consider everything we sort of heard about and what we know, 2026 is looking pretty insane. Just a couple weeks ago, I was talking about on how it's looking like a Switch 2 edition of Smash Bros. Is looking pretty likely. Considering what Sakurai's doing with Kirby Air Riders, we're probably not going to see a big brand new Smash Bros. For some time. Not saying it won't come eventually on Switch 2, but perhaps in the meanwhile, the tide fans over, they introduce a Switch 2 edition of Smash Bros. And that could possibly be this year, but I would say it would make more sense to happen next year. And so with that other possibility in mind, alongside everything else I've already mentioned, 2026 is looking to be pretty stacked, and obviously there are other options as well. So while the lineup for 2025 has been pretty good with Mario Kart World and now this masterpiece in Donkey Kong Bonanza and hopefully another masterpiece with Metroid Prime 4 later this year, and who knows, maybe another surprise title or two, Nintendo might be looking to push things even harder in 2026 with potentially an even stronger lineup once more people are ready to pick up a Switch 2 and they can more appropriately meet demand. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.